Alright, hello and welcome. I've got a Wave 23 start here for the Ancient Mines and Nightmare Hardcore Survival. Low stats, builders only. We're going to boost a stack of towers on a monk. Doesn't need to be a boost monk, just your builder is fine. Going to flip through the stats here. Since it's a low stats run, I'm going to start with the stats. 200 skill on my monk here. You could go with more or less, but you want some to make use of the tower boost. And the most important stat here is going to be the range. You could go with a little less, but more would be better. And I'll talk about how to use less. Really, a lot of the stats here don't matter because we're going to be able to repair a lot of things from where we're hanging out. This is what I'm going in with. You'll see that the fortify could be even less. We're in 1.1, we've got the EV, and we've got beams and walls here for her. I assume most people are going to start with an EV these days. So we've got a Waller EV set up for walls, but we've got some points in the other stats, 750 for fortify, 400, 300, and 200 for the other stats. It's nice to have something to help our buff beams out, but not a lot is really required. You could even go in with lower fortify because from the safety of our tower stack inside the ores, we're going to be able to repair her walls as well, so you could go in with less fortify on her. Of all of your heroes for this run specifically, the Trap Hunter stats are going to be the least important. I've got 600 and 600 for power and fortify here, 200 range, 400 rate. You could do less, you could do more. It doesn't really matter that much. We're using mostly duration crowd control traps on her, gas and darkness, one explosive to help out with some spiders and dark elves warriors, but honestly, her stats could be way lower. It's kind of a thing where more is always better, but lower stats than this would be fine. For the Builder Apprentice, we've got 750 for power, 400 for defense rate. Not quite a 2-to-1 ratio there. DST is like 2-to-1 for power to rate. Flame bursts like 4-to-3, so anywhere between those two ratios is going to be just fine. 550 for range here, and that could be lower. I like 550 as a sweet spot, but you could certainly go in with lower range. It just may affect how quickly and swiftly you're able to deal with Jin and Sharkin with your DSTs. The fortify isn't really a big deal. More power and rate would always be preferred, but less is fine too, especially if you're going in from an earlier wave. To start off the build, I'm going to lay down an aura stack here, Ensnare, Electric, and Strength Drain. The location of this aura stack is kind of important. We want it as centered as possible on the crystal and also as close to the crystal as possible. And we're going to be basing where we put the towers and everything else more or less off of the aura stack. Moving on to the Builder Apprentice, I'm going to start things off with a Flame Burst here. I like the overhead view for this to get this placement just right. And I'm going to try to get it in the middle of this tile as close to the crystal as I can, still inside of the auras, and then aim the right side of the aim lined up with the right side of the dual lane there, making sure it's going into that lane so that we've got coverage on all three lanes. Nailing the placement on the next flame burst is kind of important. I want it in this tile, in the middle of this tile, lined up horizontally as well as possible with the flame burst on the other side, and I want it to be as close to the crystal as possible as well. And then I'm going to aim the left side of the aim on this flame burst onto this torch here on the wall. And why I cross these flame bursts up is so that you have coverage on either side for when Dark Elf Warriors and Spiders come in. Then right in the middle here, I'm going to drop a DST, basically dead on, straight in the middle. No real reference point here needed. Dead on at the crystal is just fine. And then next up, we're going to have a back row of DSTs. I'm going to try to pack them in as tight as possible, so I tuck it in between the two towers in front of it as much as I can. And the left side of the aim on this one is going to cover that bush against the rock on the left lane here. That's going to make sure that this tower has coverage of all three lanes, and it's going to help out taking out those high priority enemies like the Jin and Sharkin. Same deal here. Important to kind of pack them in as tight as possible. It's going to make things easier when we lay down a buff beam later. But yeah, same deal here in terms of aim. On the left side, I want to cover that bush on the rock there. Good coverage on all three lanes here for both of those DSTs. Next up, I'll swap over to the EV, and this is kind of the moment of truth here. If you packed everything in tight enough and you got the ores in the right place, this will work with 650 range. And, I draw a 4DU buff beam across behind the flame bursts here. If you get into this situation where the ensnare is not quite in and you're at this range, just try it again, scooch the buff beam in a little more, and you'll get all three auras. This does technically work this way with 625 range, but it's got to be like pixel perfect, and I thought it had to be a little too precise. So if you get the buff beam down and your auras are in, check your towers, make sure they're all in, check to see if there's armor on each of them to make sure they're actually being buffed, and then max out your buff beam. There is a way to cheese your aura range into the buff beam with a striking gemstone. I'll talk about it later. If you have one, you could try that if you have less than 625 range. Next up, we've got some reflect fields going down here. Basically, I'm going to use 3 reflect walls, 1 DU each, to draw a triangle around the tower stack. I think it's best if the reflect walls are as close to the towers as you can get them. That way there's no gap in there for a spider to walk in and start flinging spider balls at you and still mess things up for you. It's ideal, I think, to get these reflect walls as close to the crystal as you can. Fortunately, reflect fields don't need much of a stat investment to be useful, so don't sweat it if your fortify is lower. You're not going to have to worry about these staying healthy. They will for the duration of the run without any issues. So we've got a couple of blocking fields going down next. Now the placement for these is pretty specific, and it kind of needs to be for everything to work. So I've got the first one going down here between the 2 purple crystals on this blue pile of stuff, whatever that is, and we're gonna sweep it out a little bit. It'll be a 4 DU wall, and we want it to be inside of the aura range, but far enough away from the crystal so that an ogre swinging at the wall can't cleave the crystal while it's swinging. But we also want this node of the wall to be close enough to the tower stack so that we can actually reach it and repair it mid-wave. So I kind of line it up here with this grid on the ground here between those tiles. That's a good spot. This works really well. And the same logic is going to apply to this wall over here. This one will be a 5 DU wall because this side gets more action. A lot of things depend on the ogre spawns, but a 5 DU wall here I think is better. I draw it out from that rock, that little round rock on the bottom of the wall there, and I come out to this grid here. It's got to be a 5 DU wall, so I bring it out a little bit, just barely, to make it 5 DU, but the most important thing with both of these walls is that it's inside, for the most part, inside of the auras still, specifically the electric aura, because I want things to have damage being dealt to them as they're on the walls. You're going to see that a lot of this hinges upon the way the Dark Elf warriors spawn, and we need them to take damage while they're swinging at the wall from the electric aura. Got a couple reflect fields going down here. These are kind of optional. I just feel it's the best investment with the DU that I've got left here, and what they do essentially is block the snot balls. It's actually better to not cross up the corner of the wall here. The way I put it down in the wave 1 start is better. Just put this one down the way the other one is down. It's better if it's actually in front of the wall, but those are going to bounce the snot balls back that the ogres throw at the walls when they're there. And then I got a gas trap and a darkness trap going down basically in front of the node of the reflect wall there. Same deal on this side, gas trap and darkness trap going down. This is going to clog up the lanes here, and the darkness traps are going to remove elemental resistances from anything that won't touch the strength drain aura. And then this explosive trap, I like it because it helps deal with the spiders and the Dark Elf warriors a bit. From here, I just spend the rest of this mana on upgrades, so a few levels on each of the walls and a few levels on the strength drain and the electric aura. I think that's a wise investment of the mana, and then I do throw a level up on the explosive trap. The explosive trap can be hard to get to if you stuff it into the bottom of the tower stack too far in, so I like putting it between the back row of DSTs so that you can actually get to it, and then I spend the rest of this mana just leveling up the towers in the tower stack. Just need to swap over to the monk here, and then we're good to go. I'm going to cut over to a wave 1 start here in a bit. If you're not interested in that, feel free to skip to 11 minutes and 9 seconds into the video. For wave 1, I think the easiest thing to do is to just drop the ensnare electric and strength drain aura, and then you can kind of go hide on the wooden platform here and let the auras do all the dirty work for you. That way you can wait it out and collect the mana when it's done. For wave 2, we've got a good amount of mana to play with, so I think the best thing to do is start off with the first row of the tower stack, the 2 flame bursts going down first, and then we can drop that first DST right in the middle between them as close to the crystal as you can. And I do think it's a good idea to get the explosive trap down as well to help out with some spiders. Right behind the DST is a good spot. Once I had some towers down, I felt good about starting the waves from the monk, so I swap over and start boosting. Going into wave 3, we have quite a bit of mana, almost enough to finish the build out here, so I get everything down aside from the darkness traps. I think those are the lowest priority, so I let those go until wave 4. I would drop the buff beam first because your wall placement does somewhat depend on your aura range, and buffing the auras first and then going off of that is probably easier. So if from here you do nail the buff beam placement, great. If you have an issue getting it down, you may need to make some adjustments in your tower placements or your auras. This might get patched out, but if you have a striking gemstone, one thing you can do is put that onto a hero temporarily and then stand on your aura stack and have the gemstone push your auras out, increase their range, and then what that'll do is it'll make them bigger, big enough to hit the buff beam. And then what's supposed to happen is, what currently happens is, if you remove the gemstone, they keep that buff beam buff without needing the gemstone buff to hit them. So it is a way to kind of, I don't know, it feels a bit like an exploit, and it may be patched out. I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but it is something that is currently in the game, and it may be patched out. Give it a shot if you have a striking gemstone and you don't quite have enough range for your auras. If your electric and strength drain auras are hitting the beam but the ensnare isn't, and there's nothing you can do to get the ensnare to hit it with your current range, you can just try running the build with that, and it's not the biggest deal in the world. The ensnare is kind of the lowest priority in terms of the auras that are hitting the walls. The strength drain and electric auras are much more important. You are pretty much good to go from here. You can play the waves out as your booster on your stack of towers, but for wave 4 you will want to get those darkness traps down. If you find yourself frequently in a situation where a group of fire immune enemies are standing outside of the range of your darkness trap, you may have to move them out, but that is the primary reason why we're using them. Fire immune enemies will throw things off here, and a darkness trap does help to solve that. In this situation, a spider triggers the trap for me, and I don't have to deal with the archers, but you could bat them into the range of the trap or move it out a little bit. The buff beam is going to be on the top of the list for the upgrade priority, followed by, I would say, the walls and the electric and strength drain aura. The towers would come next, and then finally everything else, but from here, the build is done and you're good to go. Okay, back at wave 23, here's the game plan. Stand on the DST between the flame bursts, G up and boost and stay here. Dark Elf warriors are going to rush down the lanes, but because of where you're standing, they're going to get hung up on the end of the walls. At least most of them will. If any of them make it around or over the walls, they're going to try to attack you, but because you're standing here, you're in the strength drain aura, and so are they. So you're going to take way reduced damage if any of them actually do make it to you. You saw me take very little damage just there. So what can happen is, if you're on, say, your flame burst or the back row of DSTs, you can draw them around the walls much more quickly and easily, and you won't be in your strength drain aura, so you're going to take a lot more damage. But once they're down, it's safe to move about your tower stack here. You see me repairing the walls a little bit. It's very easy to reach the walls to repair them. You can also repair the aura stack from here. That's why it's so safe to run it this way with such low stats. But that is essentially the gameplay loop here. That is the plan. The cycle sort of resets again, where you have a bunch of Dark Elf warriors rushing down the lanes again, and same thing. Stand on this DST, continue to boost, and don't move for a little while. If they do get over and attack you, they'll have a rough time attacking you in the first place, but if they do get a shot off on you, it'll be reduced damage and you'll be just fine. Once they're down, then you can move about your tower stack again and repair your walls if needed. So in the single lane right now, we have an example of what can happen. An ogre is body blocking a djinn that is currently stealing a defense. If you have less damage on your DSTs, it might not take that ogre out in time to then kill the djinn that's behind it, but the worst case scenario is that you lose a darkness trap, which is fine. So that's what could happen if you get, say, a specific pattern of spawn for the ogres, and then they're body blocking a djinn that's stealing a defense. That's kind of the worst case scenario here, but the worst that'll happen is you'll lose a darkness trap, which really isn't the end of the world. For the record, during my tests with this build, that never happened, but I noticed from this run that in this situation where an ogre is in front of your damage and a djinn's behind it, it's possible that a djinn could take a defense, but at least it's only going to take a darkness trap, if anything. But that's the game plan here. You know, once the ogre is down, the last ogre is down, it's just minor enemies from here, and it's pretty much smooth sailing. So if you make it to this point, congratulations, it's pretty much in the bag. That is the hardest part of the run. I speed it way up here because it's just minor enemies, and all I do from here is continue to boost and maintain my walls by repairing. You could repair the auras too if you needed, and you know, your towers may take some chip damage here and there from a wandering spider that gets a shot off on it before it dies to the explosive trap, but from here you're pretty much good. And if you can make it through wave 23, waves 24 and 25 are even easier because you just get so much more mana that you can upgrade everything, and then your defenses are that much stronger and you're in much better shape. Now, between waves, when you're collecting your mana, it is a good idea to sort of check the back of the lanes because your DSTs shoot out pretty far and things can die pretty far back. Definitely worth at least looking to make sure there's no mana back there. I do upgrade my darkness and gas traps once or twice throughout the run because, believe it or not, upping them and increasing their duration is helpful. Sometimes, see, there's a sneaky 500 mana crystal back there. I almost missed it. But upgrading the darkness and gas traps is a good idea here and there. I throw an upgrade each on the aura stack, and then I do throw an upgrade on the explosive trap. Now, they may not be necessary upgrades, but I like spreading my mana around a good bit, and then I'll pump the rest of this into the tower stack. Now, I didn't upgrade the walls because I'm going to be able to repair them mid-wave anyway, and it's a good idea to keep those upgrades available for emergency repairs, just say in case you forget to repair a wall during the wave, you can pop down, throw the upgrade on it, and then resume. You could probably upgrade it from the tower stack now that I think about it, but that is the game plan for the rest of the waves. Same deal, your safety zone here, boost your towers, and you're pretty much good to go to repeat the cycle. I'm going to cut to the end of wave 25 here for the victory. It's the same essentially throughout each wave. Once you get through wave 23 on these wave 23 starts, you're pretty much good from there. Wave 23 is the hardest, but I have to sell everything just to get to the victory chest here. Something to keep in mind with this run is that if you die, you'll respawn inside the towers, unfortunately, so you'll have to sell one just to get out. Underwhelming giraffe here. I do check a few of the other items that are around just to give you an idea of what kind of gear you can expect here. But yeah, some decent pieces. Anything with all 4 builder stats is going to be a great piece. That's a great piece right there for a builder. And this piece here, that's what you want to see for a DPS character. And yeah, more builder gear here. So this is the kind of gear that you can get here, and it's a good idea to gear up here. Now, I'm going to flip through my stats one more time. This is actually the same clip as the beginning of the video, but yeah, the range being the biggest thing for the monk, the fortify being the biggest thing for the EV. Anything helps. If you go in with more stats, that's great, but you can totally just go in with less. Whatever you have, I would encourage you to just give it a shot, but the big thing is going to be the aura range, and there are a couple ways to get around that, like we talked about with the striking gemstone, or just running with a smaller ensnare aura and at least getting the electric and strength drain inside. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Any questions or concerns, feel free to let me know in the comments below. You can also join the Discord to get more direct access to me if you'd like. But yep, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching.